Hello, so in this video we're going to take a look at understanding account groups a little bit more, and we're going to combine it with some of the things we were just looking at with understanding a website and website structure. That's kind of where we'll apply some of this knowledge. So if you remember where we were just at in the last video, we were starting to take a look at some of the basics of what our website structure looked like. And so on my Metasploitable machine, I'm going to CD over to my location where my website's running. That's in the /var/www. And in here, we were looking at ls/-l to see our privileges, and we noticed that everything that was running out of our website was created by this user www-data, okay, this www-data user. And what we'd like to understand is when you start looking at the privileges of something like this, you'll notice that www-data had read-write privileges to the file, and everyone in his group also had only read privileges. All other users only had read privileges as well, specifically for this index.php file. And this gives us kind of just an opportunity to expand our knowledge of working with groups, understanding how this is important, and then seeing how it might apply to something like modifying a website. Now, there is a command in here to see what are the groups that all of the different accounts are currently exist on a computer. And this is all stored in a file called the groups file. I believe we need sudo privileges in order to access this file, so I'll do a sudo nano/etc/groups, or excuse me, /group. Okay. And in this particular file, what this shows is this shows all of the groups that have currently been created on this particular system, as well as all of the different users that have been added to that group. So as I scroll up and down this file, you see there's quite a few groups currently on my Metasploitable machine. And for the most part, the MSF admin account is really the only user who's been added to any one of these groups. Now you do notice he's part of multiple groups. I kind of got him maybe about halfway down. You see there actually is a Telnet D user who's been added to this UTMP group. So there are one or two others that have been added on this particular system. There's a Postgres that's been added to an SSL-cert group. But for the most part, it's MSF admin who kind of seems to be sort of running the show. So www-data was one of the groups on here. And you'll notice, just for reference, there is one all the way at the bottom called user as well. So we'll hang on to that, and we'll be using that in just a second. So, so just good knowledge to see where is the current groups that exist on this particular machine. Okay. Now, if I wanted to start applying this a little bit more, this is where we can see there is a groups command. Okay, there is a command groups. Okay, and the way that this works is you could type out groups, and it will currently show what groups is the user a part of. So if I type out groups specifically from MSF admin, it spits out all those groups that we were just looking at that my MSF admin account is actually a part of. Another way you could use this is we saw that there was a user called user, and we could look at maybe to see what groups is he a part of. So if I do something like groups and then specify a specific username, not the user I'm currently logged in as, you see this one just comes back and says, no, the only one that he's a part of is just user. I could do this as well for www-data. Okay, so understanding we got a couple other users, and they're the only ones in their own group. Okay, they don't actually belong to another group. And this we're going to kind of combine with the knowledge of, we saw that www-data was the owner of this index.php file. And there is another user called user on this system that we'd like to start seeing. He's the one we're going to mess around with. And the MSF admin account, that's kind of my privilege user, and we'll do a lot of the administrative sort of off of this account. So that's going to kind of be our goal here to see, can I start messing around with some of my website structure by changing some of the groups and understanding kind of how this works across these two different accounts. So if I were to log in as my user account right now, just to give it a try, I could do this by doing an SU to user. And the password for this account is just user. So it's got a username and a login, both of user. And you'll see now through a who am I, I'm now currently logged in and acting as user. Now if I were to try to change that file, that particular file, that index.php, I could do something like nano and then index.php, and I can open up this file, and I might come down here just like before I kind of said hello, James was here, and maybe I want to say hello, user was here. And he wants to make a change to the file as well. I'll do a Control X and say Y to try to save my changes to index.php. and you'll get an error writing index.php. Permission is denied. So this is where we understand, we kind of saw this through the ls-l command, that user does not have permissions to actually make changes to this file. He's not part of the www data group. So I'll have to press Control-X and just say, no, don't save any of my changes. I do have read permissions to the file, but I don't have write permissions. So we can confirm this, remember, through my ls-l of that index.php. You see, I had that last one as an R, but I don't have write permissions to this file. Well, the next thing to say would be, maybe I can overwrite this. Maybe I can act as sudo for this particular user, and I can try to make changes to it anyways, just the same way that my MSF admin account might. So sudo nano index.php. And what's going to happen with this? I type in my password for user, type in user again, and it's going to spit out another message saying, hey, users is not in the sudoers file. So on top of this, we see that user is not part of the www data group, and he's also not part of the sudoers file as well. He's not a privileged user. He's just an ordinary user on this particular system. So this is something we're going to try to remedy and get practice with a little bit working with groups. Let's see if we can get him added to some of these other groups. Now, users does not have the permission to do this. He can't self-elevate his own permissions. So I'm going to type exit and manage some of this back through my MSF admin account. So I typed out exit, and now I'm back acting as MSF admin. And the thing to see would be what particular groups would be of interest for going in and modifying some of the permissions, and so then he can start accessing some of these resources. So the first one will be, let's see if we can get him added to that www-data group. Okay, and the way that we can do this is through a sudo command. We could do a sudo and then just do a gpasswd. So we're adding a group. We're going to add a user to a particular group. We do this through the -a command, and then we type out the user that we'd like to do, which is, in this case, user. That's the account we want to add. And then we type the group that we'd like to add him to, in this case, www-data. Typed it out, adding user to group www-data. So now when I do a groups command on user, we'll see he currently is added in the user group, and he also is now added to www-data. So if we take a look at our privileges, we'll notice, does this particular user now have the ability to change this file? And remember, through our ls-l, we currently have it set to be read-write for the owner of the file, www-data, but people in the same group still only have read permission. They don't actually have write permission to this particular file. So why don't we go through and we'll change the permissions of this file so that someone in the same group as www-data would actually be able to write to this file as well. So we can do this by doing a sudo chmod. And then we're going to leave, we'll leave the current permission of 6 for www-data. We'll add 6 to also have anyone in the group www-data allow for read and write permissions. And then we'll leave it as a 4 for just read permissions for everyone else. And this is all on the index.php file. So some more practice with managing privileges, do an ls-l to see what we just changed. And we'll see for our index.php, it now says RW, and then there's a second RW now again. So this time when I SU over to user, it's going to switch users back to him, log in as user, and is he now going to have permission to change this file? So if I do something like a nano and then index.php, and then I come down here and I say, hello, user was here, exclamation point, and then like before, I'll try to save it, Control X, Y. Okay, and you see this time we actually were able to write the changes. I'm going to come over here to my Kali machine and we'll just do an update. Password, wake this guy back up. And we're going to update the website and just see where the changes actually go through to the website. So I'm going to pop open a browser and visit the website, be able to just kind of confirm that the things we've been messing around here with our groups have actually gone through. So 192.168.1.101. And you see it says James was here as well as hello user was here. Okay, so just kind of confirming some of this. I was able to change my permissions using the MSF admin account. That allowed the user to become part of the www-data group, And based on those permissions, I was now able to write the file. Now as I'm logged in with user, is he going to have permissions? Let's say the user account wants to give everyone else permissions. He wants to spread the permissions on this file. So would he be able to do a chmod, let's say 666, giving everyone, not just www-data or the people in the group, would he be able to spread permissions for this index.php? And we'll see here, no, he doesn't. He doesn't actually have the authority to change permissions, even though he does have read and write access. That does not give him the authority to actually change permissions and how this file is being managed. We also saw that he's not part of the sudoers file either. So why don't we type out an exit and start changing some of that fact as well. So we'll start figuring out a way to elevate the user's permission through the MSF admin account. So if we go back to the sudoers file, just to kind of remember how that works, this is all done through a sudo /etc sudo nano /etc /sudoers. So remember, this particular file is the file that manages all of the elevated privileged users. So right now, root is specifically listed as a user who is allowed to elevate and override any of the existing preset permissions. And you'll notice all the way down at the bottom of the file, there's also this place where it says % and then admin. Okay, so this shows that there's a group called admin, and any user who's part of the admin group also is allowed to make elevated privileges. And right now, the only member who's actually part of this group is the MSF admin account. But the question now is, if I could add the user either directly to this file, or if I could add user to admin to the admin group, he would inherit the ability to elevate privileges. So I'm not going to type out, I'm not going to make any changes to this file. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's add that user account to the admin admin group as well. So we'll do this just by doing that command we just did before, sudo gpasswd. We're going to do an add user, and this time we're going to add him to the admin group. Adding user to group admin. Okay, great. So let's kind of confirm this by doing a groups user. And we'll see now that the user account is part of user www-data, and he's now been added to admin as well. So if I switch back over to the user account now, su back to user, log back in as the user account, and we'll see that as I now act as the user account, does he now have the ability to change permissions? Let's say he wanted to change permissions on this file by doing something like sudo chmod 666, giving everyone read and write access to this particular file, the index.php. Can he actually run something like that? He ends up typing in his password, and it looks like it ran. Let's do an ls-l, and we'll confirm now, logged in as the user account. He was indeed able to elevate and change the permissions of this file to which he does not own, and he just also happens to be part of the group. And it's the admin group that gave him the authority to do this. If you wanted to revoke other people's authority, you could run the command again, but this time instead of running something like 666, maybe he could run something like 600, which ends up pulling away everyone's permissions for this particular file, sudo chmod 666 index. And now when you take a look at the permissions on that file, you'll see only www-data, the actual owner of the file, is allowed to make changes to the file. So this time, if he were to make changes to the file directly, let's say by doing something like nano just nano index.php without running it as an elevated, you'll see error reading this, permission denied. So even though he's part of the www-data group, because the www-data group was just given no permissions, without elevating permissions, the user account is not allowed to even read this file anymore. He just took that off. So I'm going to reset the permissions back to what they were to begin with. So all the way back to begin with, they were listed as a 644, which is the owner of the file can read and write to the file. Everyone else can only read the file. chmod 644 index of PHP. So now my ls-l, and we'll see now it's kind of back all the way to the start. I'd like to also kind of clean up the little notes that I added to that file. So I'll do something like a sudo nano index.php, And in here, we have this little user was here command, and we also have this James was here, and I'm just going to backspace these guys out. Okay, and I'll leave in two blank lines there just for formatting purposes, but I'll do my Control X, Y, Enter. So I was able to still write these changes to this particular file, and we'll just kind of confirm this over here in Kali. If I do my updates, yeah, he does still have administrator privileges, but he just he doesn't have the ability to make changes without elevating, without typing out sudo. So one of the last things that I'd like to show here, all while still using this user account, is if I took a look at, remember, of this groups for user, I've added myself to 2 different groups, and a lot of this would be reflected as well back in that in the group file. So if we take a quick look over to sudo nano /etc/group. And now if we can scroll down our ways and find the admin account, I believe it's kind of towards the bottom. Ooh, there's the www-data where user's been added to that group. We can kind of see that one. And keep scrolling down. It's most of the way down, and that's where we've kind of got MSF admin and user now have been added to this admin group as well. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to see how could we remove this. Okay. So that file does manage this, but let's also see a command that could do this as well. So we'll do a sudo gpasswd, and this time we'll do the -d command, and that's what will remove a user from a particular group. And this time we'll do user as the particular user, and let's remove him from www-data. So we just removed him from www-data. And let's do this again. We'll remove him from the admin group as well. So he just ran a sudo command and removed himself from admin. So now if I do a groups of user, we'll see that he's back to just being a lowly user. He doesn't actually, he's not going to have the authority going forward. Now an important note to make though is that so long as this particular terminal and session is open, notice we still will have the group privileges. So if I do something like sudo cat /etc/shadow, this is a file that would require those elevated privileges. You notice even though he's been removed from the admin account, he does still have the privileges so long as this terminal is active. So I could cat out the shadow file, I could cat out my sudoers file, things like this. So it is important to notice that if you have the ability to have elevated privileges, you're going to have to log out of this particular terminal. Otherwise, this active terminal is still going to have the elevated privileges going. So as soon as I type exit, though, that'll be it for him. User is now kind of back to just a lowly user. So we're seeing here how some more practice with understanding what users are part of the groups, as well as understanding who owns files, specifically when we're looking at things like website files and website groups. This is going to be really important to maintaining the integrity of a website, to not allow other users or people to whom are part of that group to be able to make unintended changes to these files.